finding higher diabetes rates among those heavily exposed to toxic pollutants, Agent Orange exposure, chemical plant explosions, living next to a toxic waste dump, or eating fish out of the Great Lakes, that's one thing, but would the same link be found in just a random sample of the general population? Yes, a strong dose-dependent relationship between the levels of these pollutants circulating in people's blood and diabetes. Those with the highest levels of pollutants in their bloodstream had 38 times the odds of diabetes. Interestingly, there was no association between obesity and diabetes among subjects with non-detectable levels of pollutants. In other words, obesity was a risk factor for diabetes only if people had blood concentrations of these pollutants above a certain level. We all know obesity predisposes us to diabetes, but according to the study, only if our bodies are polluted, only perhaps if the fat we're carrying is carrying chemicals. This finding kind of implies that virtually all the risk of diabetes conferred by obesity is attributable to these pollutants, and that obesity might only be a vehicle for such chemicals. Could we be carrying around our own little toxic waste dump on our hips? This possibility is shocking. Now, it's entirely possible that the 6 pollutants they looked at are not themselves causally related to diabetes. Maybe they're just surrogates of exposure to a mixture of chemicals. After all, 90% of these pollutants come from animal foods in the general population. Except for individuals living or working around industrial sites where these chemicals were used or dumped, the most common source of exposure to PCBs is from diet, with foods of animal origin, especially seafood. So this strong relationship they found between certain pollutants and diabetes may just be pointing to other contaminants in animal products. In the past 2 years, 6 separate meta-analyses have been published on the relationship between fish consumption and type 2 diabetes. The whole point of a meta-analysis, though, is to compile together the best studies done to date and see what the overall balance of evidence shows. The fact that there are 6 different ones published recently highlights how open the question remains. One thread of consistency, though, was that fish consumers in the United States tend to be at greater risk for diabetes. If you include Europe too, then fish eaters appeared to have a 38% increased risk of diabetes. On a per-serving basis, that comes out to be about 5% increase in risk for every serving of fish one has per week. To put that into perspective, a serving of red meat is associated with a 19% increase in risk, but that's per day. Just one serving of fish a week is 5%, so a serving a day would be like a 35% increase in risk, worse than red meat. But why? Well, fish intake and omega-3 fats may increase type 2 diabetes risk by increasing blood sugar levels, as found in a review of the evidence commissioned by the U.S. government. An increase in blood sugars in diabetics given fish oil. Or maybe because the omega-3s cause oxidative stress. A recent study found that the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas don't appear to work as well in people who eat 2 or more servings of fish a week. Or it may be because of the environmental contaminants that build up in fish. It all started with Agent Orange. We sprayed 20 million gallons of this stuff on Vietnam, and some of it was contaminated with trace amounts of dioxins. Though the Red Cross there estimates 1 million Vietnamese were adversely affected, what about all the servicemen, the U.S. servicemen who were exposed, spraying it across the countryside? Reports started showing up that veterans exposed to Agent Orange appeared to have higher diabetes rates than unexposed veterans, a link that's now officially recognized. These so-called persistent organic pollutants are mainly man-made industrial chemicals, and among the most hazardous compounds ever synthesized. They include dioxins, PCBs, certain chlorine-containing pesticides, all of which are highly resistant to breaking down in the environment. Initially described for their deleterious effect on reproductive function and their ability to cause cancer, there is now a growing body of evidence showing that exposure to these pollutants leads to metabolic diseases such as diabetes. This is a breakthrough that should require our greatest attention.